Hello, everybody. Welcome into the afternoon. I hope you all had a wonderful lunch. Hopefully we're not crashing too much. It's a little bit of time before the nap, right? So, before the need for the nap. By way of introduction, I'm Elza. I am an assistive tech consultant for CareScribe, and I predominantly work with organizations and businesses that strive to become more accessible by implementing our tech. Just to give you a bit of context, background context, we're an assistive tech company based in the heart of Bristol, and we've been developing software since 2020. Both of our founders are actually neurodivergent, which means we develop software from a very deep and personal understanding of what it is, what barriers individuals face in workplace and education when it comes to accessibility. We specifically specialize in the topic of live captioning and how it can transform the way people engage with information. And so what I want to speak to you about today specifically is why live captioning helps everyone listen, learn, and remember. Let's try that again. Hello. Space. This is not connected. Sorry. Oh, fabulous. Okay. What's a talk without a little bit of technical difficulty, right? Fabulous. We're all human. Tech is too, clearly. We often assume that listening is easy. We assume that if someone is speaking clearly, everyone in the room is receiving that information equally. They're remembering it, they're processing it, retaining it. But when you actually think about how people experience meetings, conferences, and workplaces, that is really not true at all. Listening takes a huge amount of mental effort and can be cognitively tasking. Spoken information is temporary, it's fragile. It happens and then it's gone, it disappears. Once something is said, there is no way to rewind and listen back to that. Unlike written information, you can't pause it, you can't reread it, you can't process it at your own pace, and that becomes really, really difficult when we engage with a load of important information in a workplace setting. Add to that, we're all multitasking constantly. Right now, for example, you're listening to me, but you might also be taking notes. You're listening to me, but you're also reading the slides. Some of you are probably thinking about another session. Perhaps you're connecting ideas and thoughts. Some of you might be thinking about how this applies to your own experience and how your organization works. And that is completely normal. In workplaces, it's even more intense. We hop from a meeting to a meeting. We might be reviewing a document in the background, although we'd never tell. We are scanning Slack or Microsoft Teams for a message from somebody. We're switching between tabs. It all becomes very, very cognitively tasking very quickly. So attention is already divided before we even add human factors to it. Noisy room. Poor room acoustics. Background noise, different accents, different ways of speaking, industry jargon, unfamiliar words, terminology, fatigue, stress, information overload, post-lunch crash, anyone? Not yet. All of those things increase the mental effort required for you to process and keep up with information that is given to you. And I think what is really interesting is that most people don't actually realize how much we miss. Our brains have this wonderful capability of getting a general idea and filling in the gaps. But what gets lost is the detail. I'm sure everyone's had that experience where you leave a meeting and you think, oh, I really listened. I can kind of talk about what was discussed, but actually I can't remember the action points anymore. Or maybe I can remember a couple, but not all of them. Or perhaps halfway through a a talk, you realize that you missed something that was essential 2 minutes ago, just because you lost your attention for a second. And moments like that can be incredibly disruptive. And that is not, by the way, that is not because you're bad at listening. That is just how human attention works. It's natural, it's human. And the research around this is actually really strong and interesting. A large review published in Educational Psychology Review analysed over 100 studies. And what became apparent is that live captioning is a massive contributor to comprehension, information processing, and retention of that information. And here's the really important part. The benefits weren't limited to just accessibility in a traditional sense. It wasn't just the users who have hearing loss or who are deaf that benefited from live captions. It was everybody that participated in the study. So accessibility actually overarches and goes far more beyond than what we might want to define it as. And honestly, when you think about it, it makes complete sense. When people can both hear and read information at the same time, they're not completely relying on short-term memory to hold on to what's being said. And let me tell you something about your working memory, by the way. Your working memory is constantly trying to discern between what information to keep here and what information to throw away. And so what are the chances that you're actually catching every single thing that I'm saying when there is so much decision-making happening in the background, in your mind? Captions give people another way to process information. They reinforce meaning. Meaning in meetings, in fact. Let's go with that. They give people a second chance to catch something if they missed it the first time. And that helps a much wider group of people than we sometimes realize. Maybe English isn't your first language. Maybe you're neurodivergent. Maybe you have auditory processing differences. Or maybe you're just tired after a day full of meetings, sessions, and your attention is starting to slip a little bit. And all those experiences are incredibly normal. And like I said, they're all human experiences. Which is why I think it's important to stop thinking about accessibility as something that is designed for a tiny group in the corner of a room. Because actually most accessibility features solve very human problems. And struggling to keep up with spoken information is one of them. So if we know that attention is limited, memory is fragile, and spoken word disappears as soon as it's being let out, why do we still design most workplaces and events around audio alone? Let's give this another go. Success. This is why live captioning makes such a huge difference in conferences, workplaces, and shared spaces like this. Because captions don't just help people hear better. They completely change how information transits in the room. Instead of information appearing for a very short period of time and then disappearing, speech, captions make it tangible and visible in real time. People can hear information, read it at the same time, which immediately reduces some of the pressure of trying to catch every single word. And that matters because environments like this are actually really cognitively demanding. We expect people to absorb huge amounts of information, jump from a session to a session, whilst multitasking, whilst trying to remain focused, keeping the attention going. Captions help reduce that mental load. Instead, spending energy trying to not miss anything, we can actually focus on engaging. We can focus on the discussion. We can focus on connecting ideas, understanding ideas, and collaborating. It allows for space to breathe. And what's incredibly important about live captions is they create shared access. Traditionally, accessibility has often worked by making individuals ask for support first. Raise a hand. I struggle with audio information. I struggle with processing speech. Can I have something to help me with that? That can be so uncomfortable. Some people don't want to disclose conditions publicly. Some people don't know that support is available. And importantly, a lot of people find it very nerve-wracking to disclose because we're still worried about how that is going to be perceived in a workplace environment. Live captions remove a lot of that pressure because the support is simply there. Nobody has to explain themselves. Nobody needs to ask, raise their hand. People can just engage with the information in a way that works best for them. And I think that is such an important shift when we talk about accessibility. The best accessibility is often accessibility for which you don't have to advocate for, something that is there for you to take advantage of. And something that is built into the environment by default. And we've seen this happen with a lot of accessibility features over time. Things originally introduced for accessibility solely become something that is actually incredibly helpful for the majority of people using it. Curb cuts are a great example. They were designed initially for wheelchair users, but actually they help all of us. Cyclists, people with large luggages, people with baby strollers. It's really something that has been adapted by many people, whereas to begin with it was designed for a smaller group. And captions work in a very similar way. Yes, they're incredibly important for deaf individuals and individuals with hearing loss, but they also help multilingual audiences, neurodivergent people, people with auditory processing differences, people in noisy environments, and honestly, anyone trying to capture information quickly and thoroughly. Today's live captions are provided by a product that we supply, Captioned. If you want to come and speak with me about them at the stand, please do. I would love to speak more on this topic. But one thing I really like about having captions available at events like these is that they create accessibility without placing the responsibility of an individual to ask for it. People can follow along on their phone, they can follow along on the screen, and they can be in charge of how they use that information. And they can use it in a way that suits them best. And because everybody has access to the same support, accessibility becomes part of the culture of the event itself, not something happening separately for a smaller group somewhere in the corner. And that means better communication for everybody, better retention, better comprehension, better understanding, and better idea generation. So if there's one thing that I'd like to leave you with today, it's this. Accessibility is not just about removing barriers for a small group of people. It's actually about improving the experience for everybody in the room. Thank you very much for listening.